right, there we are. We're going to get started here. So great to be with everybody. And we've got a great group and a lot of people who need a lot of help. So that good news is for that, Paige and Sharon. And let me just do one thing here really quick. Make sure that everything's dialed in. And then I'm going to unmute you guys. All right.
I'm feeling unmuted. Is it the case?
That you are unmuted.
Excellent.
How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Yeah, fabulous.
The music was fun.
But usually when I'm talking to you guys, it's only 3 of us. Now we've got, let's see here, we got like 70, 80 people listening to us. So yeah, just hit 7.
Awesome.
So it's so good to be with you. So hey, I just want to make sure, Paige, you're just as you're, I'm only seeing part of your. Well, there you are. You're good. You know what? Actually, it's good because of the way I expand it. You're great.
Okay.
So hey, let's get started. So first of all, you guys, the 2 of you, are huge heroes to me, and you have changed my life and had such profound impact on it in regards to my personal relationship, just with myself, of course, with Jennifer, my wife, and my children, and frankly, the impact that the 2 of you have had has had a profound impact also on everything that we do with Century 21 Everest and everything that we do as an organization, and just how I lead and how I go about life. And so just one, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for the impact you've had on me and so many people. You guys are truly my heroes, and I consider you not only dear friends, but people who truly take people to a better life and to a more fulfilling life. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. That warms my heart. Thank you.
Yeah. And I have not spoken. He came to my door a few days ago, but I wasn't available. But John Rhodes, many of you know John, and John is who started our relationship. And I said, hey, I'm thinking of seeing someone. He goes, well, you need to go see this guy. So a lot of people are very private about the fact that they've gone to see different people. And I think that, gosh, anybody who's committed to growth, my hats are off to them. So with that, let me just start off first. Just give us a little bit of a background, and Sharon or Paige, whoever wants to start, but just give us a little background of just your history. I know that each of you have been doing this for decades, and explain who you are and why I think you're so cool.
All right. Well, shall I go first?
Sure.
Well, I've been a psychotherapist, a marriage counselor, a personal coach since about 1982-ish. And, I've trained with excellent people. I've been the beneficiary of a lot of great mentors, people who have taught me how to think and orient to the world, which has been really awesome. Some of those are professional clinicians, but my favorites are my Uncle Frank and my cousin Bill, and a lot of those guys who taught me how to explain things on a horse while riding in the backcountry or moose hunting. And I learned pretty quickly that if you can explain it to somebody on horseback, you probably can teach anybody anywhere. And so I've kind of relearned it too.
I love it. I haven't heard that.
I've really tried to be grounded and to be straightforward and be pretty non-technical in the way I explain things. So part of what we'll be doing today is talking about things in grounded, very straightforward ways. No psychobabble, really. Let's get down to what it's like to be alive and to live really, really well, especially in extraordinary times like this. And so each of us, both Sharon and I.
Well, my favorite story, Paige, my favorite story of you, Paige, is my first time I met you, first words are out of mouth when I was explaining a situation. And I said, no, I'm fine with that. And I remember I wasn't fine. And I remember you said, so I'm just curious. So when did you consider the fact that it was okay to lie every time and tell people everything's okay? It just like stopped me in my tracks and made me take a step back. And that I remember when you said these words, people who say they're fine are not fine, because if you're not fine, you don't need to say that. And so that means there's still further conversation that's needed from that standpoint, and a further resolve or discussion is the hopeful outcome. So that's great. So thank you. All right, Sharon.
Okay. So.
Paige, you gonna say something else, Paige?
Oh, I might ramble on all day. We have to cut me off at some point.
All right. Go ahead, Sharon.
So formally.
That's right. Let's hear about this lady.
Okay. I had formal clinical psychology training at UC Santa Barbara. So I got my doctorate there. And
All right. That's right up the road from our market up there in California in Ventura County.
I know. It's tough to be really focused on a dissertation when you have the ocean and the mountains to go hiking and all these really beautiful things to do, and you're sitting and you're writing and doing research. So there you go. So that was the
right. I bet.
First lesson in discipline.
Yeah.
So that was formal training, and then my experience has spanned from childhood to the very old, and I've worked in settings such as a neuropsychiatric hospital at UCLA, and inpatient and outpatient settings. I've worked at a prison for teens. I've worked also at residential treatment through Primary Children's Medical Center. So I've had a number of different settings that I've worked in, as well as Salt Lake School District. But I think the thing I have learned the most has come through my own experiences as a parent, as well as my experience in relationship and diving deep in intimacy, sexuality, partnership. There's so many life lessons that you don't really learn through your formal education. So that's been powerful for me. And the thing I enjoy most truly is now working with couples and working with women and looking at how to really improve vitality and how we orient to the world in ways that are with our resilience and pleasure. So that's a little about that.
That's great. That's great. That's great. Well, thank you. And you've had a profound impact. In fact, you're one of the most thought-provoking people I know. I mean, you've given me so much insight to even my own verbal dialogue as to how I approach my life. It has been very, very powerful. So thank you also. So it's great. So one, I know that we have visited just for a few minutes of just some of the things that you, of course, I know you want to share, but just in a nutshell, maybe just start from here. There's a lot of emotion, as we all know, that's pretty high staked right now. And you're speaking to a lot of people who are the people who are an essential service, but at the same time, there's a lot of fear that wraps around things. There's a lot of people out there that even almost feel guilty for doing business. There's a lot of people who are even being, I almost want to say, shamed on the idea that they're going out and trying to either make a living for their family or help someone who truly is in need to getting a property sold. And then the dynamics of everybody being, in so many words, the stay-at-home actions in both Utah and California. And it's, I mean, we've talked about this, right? You can really feel the pressures of the home front and the way that relationships are happening. And we're seeing a huge increase in suicide. We're seeing a huge increase in domestic violence. And it's an interesting world. So what counsel can you give to this group? What would you share with them as to how to maneuver and navigate through these things?
Well, the first thing is a question. How many of you have been through a pandemic before?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
exactly.
Really,
no, it's not.
Is there any preparation for this?
No.
This is the first time. One of the things you have to really get clear about is this pandemic, quarantine, and everything that means is the first time for all of us. Nobody's going into this thing. At least very, very few people have been through a pandemic. A few guys went through the Ebola virus, but they're a little better prepared for the rest of us. But the reality is we're all guessing about how to go through this. And when experts are talking about this is what happens in quarantine, I want you to know something. They're making that up with the best of intentions, but they've never been through it. And there's very little data about this. And all of us are the most recent graduates in our culture of how to deal with a pandemic. You're on the front lines of this thing. We've gone from kind of shock and awe, a kind of disbelief, is this really happening? And what exactly is happening? To try and make sense out of what this is. And on a daily basis, we're encountering new things in new ways. I mean, I remember the first time we're considering shopping under quarantine, and we're radical social distancers in our house. And we said, man, I'd really like some bread from over at Fresh Market. And it's our favorite bread outside of Paris. I mean, it's so good. We said, okay, well, let's do that. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I guess I got to wear gloves and wear a mask, and the checkout person is standing 4 feet from where the bread is, and that's where everybody checks out. So they're exchanging credit cards. And I looked at Sharon and I said, oh my gosh, this is like, all I want is a loaf of bread, and it has somehow become a special ops exercise. We finally didn't go get our bread, and we still haven't got bread. And I want to apologize to the bakery for that, and I'm missing the bread. I got to tell you, if that's how complex it is to purchase your favorite loaf of bread, how much more complex is it to sort through the vagaries of what's right and what's wrong in a pandemic? Should I go to work? Should I not? Am I essential? Am I not? What's my responsibility to my family and protecting them versus my clients? We've been doing telemedicine for about 6 weeks now. We haven't seen any clients in person. I have a feeling I might not see clients in person for 6 months to a year more. Now, I'm a little bit more pessimistic than most people, and I'm liking the good news, but we're all trying to make sense of this. And so if you're confused, it's because you're going through a first time. You remember your first time driving? You remember your first time selling a home? You remember your first time doing anything? It's a period of confusion. You're trying to figure it out. There's some excitement, there's some anxiety, but there's a lot of confusion, and there are no manuals for how to do this. So we've gone through the first phase. We figured out how to survive. Congratulations if you've been able to feed your family, you've been able to pay your rent, negotiate with your landlord, your bank, whatever. You're killing it right now. But in the process of doing this, everything that was always there in the background is going to show up in your household. The conflicts that existed between you and your partner that were unresolved previously, proximity is going to push that. Now, I know y'all love your children, and I love mine, but the complexities of the parent-child relationship are kicking in here. All the unresolved things are coming to the forefront because, I don't know about you, but there's not much escape. There's been the three of us, Ben, Sharon, and I in the household, and we're rocking and rolling with a question about how do we relate to each other? How do we resolve conflict? How do we do that? I assume that you're all in the midst of that.
So I just
Right.
want to also, just to support things that Paige is saying or emphasize really the level of complexity in our lives right now. You're bringing up some things, George. You're distilling some areas of concern that the people you work with are experiencing right now. And I want to offer that the level of complexity in our lives is far greater than the things that we're even talking about. So this background noise is part of what we're experiencing in our daily life. Yeah. And we're not even naming it or even appreciating that level of stress, even if we're doing well during this experience by making good decisions, partnering well with the person who we love, and how we're raising our kids through this. So,
well, you're saying, Sharon, both of you are saying something very profound. And yesterday I found myself, it's okay to admit to yourself that this is really stressful, that this is really difficult, that this is really hard. Like just the acknowledgement that, wow, like to your point, Paige, like you're talking, like, look, like first time. Like, it's not like we've like, I love that analogy of driving the car for the first time. I just had my little Bella driving the car, and all of a sudden I find I say, hit, or my son's driving with her, and he says, hit the brake, and she hits the gas. Oh. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, whoa. And fortunately they were in a, vacant parking lot.
Right, sure.
But, but it's interesting, just acknowledging, like not making it worse than it is, not making it better than it is, just calling it as is. It's tough.
It's my first time. I'm not supposed to do this well. I mean, I have pretty baseline expectations for myself. I've shared with you, George, that I consider myself a smart primate with a cell phone. And I think I'm getting through it pretty well, okay? I mean, if you're navigating the complexities of this at all, just remember to be humble as you approach this thing. It's okay to be stressed. I go through periods of attention deficit now that I've never experienced before. As I'm moving through my day, I suddenly realize I haven't been able to focus for an hour. And I don't think it's happened with clients, but they would be the best judge of that. Maybe it has happened. And it's like, wow, I'm experiencing the inability to focus my attention in meaningful ways when I want to. And I have to be able to cut myself some slack about that. This is novel. This is new. You are unbelievably unprepared for this experience. Be humble in the face of it. You've gotten this far, you're killing it. You're doing really, really well. If you fed your family, you figured out some aspects of work, you're really doing well. But acknowledging, I don't really know how to do the relational part of this under quarantine. This is an incredibly pressurized environment. All of your issues are going to.
So acknowledging, Paige, acknowledging that from that standpoint, what tools or strategies would you recommend in regards to the home front? Because I think that's where so much of the pressure is, right? To your point, right? You've talked about that whatever was kind of lingering back there that wasn't that big of a deal, now you're in this pressure cooker. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to apologize to my kids, apologizing to Jennifer, apologizing to an agent, because I can just feel that edge.
Right.
So how do we effectively navigate based on what we know about crisis and what we at least know at this point?
Well, there are different ways to answer that question. When I listen to talking heads on TV or on the internet, I see a lot of people giving advice, and it all sounds pretty good. And if you want to go online, you're going to be able to find a lot of really good advice. My thoughts about it are rooted in a very different approach. And as Sharon and I have talked about it, we're looking at this as an opportunity for personal growth at the worst possible time in your personal history to grow. Whatever was difficult to do before will be more difficult to do now. Whatever level of complexity existed in your life before, there's more now. And you may want to grow in the ways that you did before. You may have thought of new ways. But if you're going to get through this, if you're going to be able to really grow in this context, it's going to mean you're going to have an awfully clear intention about what growth means here. For some of us, growth is going to mean acknowledging that we're human. I mean, for a lot of us, especially men, we've been taught to walk around like we've got this all together. Everybody get behind us and march on.
Got it all figured out.
Yeah, I got this figured
out. Paige,
out.
Real estate agents are worse, Paige, because we got to look like our hair is perfect, our suits are perfect, our car is perfect, life is perfect, because we're going to take care of your home sale or your home purchase, and it's all perfect. We've got it all dialed in. We're in an industry in real estate where everything's supposed to look perfect.
Yeah.
I want to challenge that statement even further, George, by saying we are drawn to our careers for certain reasons. We align with certain things in our life. So there is something about our very nature that is aligned with that piece, that how we present in the world, how we show up in the world as things are working well for us and we have things well handled. So when you're saying I explode more at home, I'm not loving that just in this conversation right now. All of us are having an emotional experience that is different than what we had before all of this was arising in terms of the magnification of it.
And we're not going to look as good. And if your identity is I look really good, I have the answers, I can take care of you. In an environment where you're doing a lot of things for the first time, or you're doing familiar things for the first time in a new way, you're not going to look so good, and it's going to challenge your sense of self. And so one of the things that I think is really important that's inherent in what Sharon's saying here is you're going to have to realize that your first person to deal with is you, because you're going to get you showing up like crazy now. Whatever your personal ego is about, whatever your personal identity about, is going to be threatened under these current circumstances, because frankly, we don't know how to do this. And the things that are nearest and dearest to us are going to feel threatened. And we have a choice between responding out of fear or out of desire for something else. To do this, you have to take yourself on. And, you know, there's some really good people doing great work now. They're not doing it about the pandemic, but they're doing it in other areas. Dr. Shalifa and some other people are doing some really amazing work on recognizing that if you want to deal with the issue of parenting, you're going to be really dealing with the issue of yourself, parenting. And your first job is to recognize you've got to parent yourself better than you were parented. Because oftentimes we've inherited a whole legacy of ideas about how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to think, feel, and act, show up in the world, what we're supposed to believe in. And we've inherited all that. It's never been questioned. And you come into a pandemic, into a moment of chaos and crisis, and all of those things will come to the surface. Now that's good news and bad news. I mean, the good news is it's available to you. You can work on it. The bad news is the timing is just awful. It's happening during the pandemic. And so it's a good news, bad news thing. But you're gonna
Paige, speak to like you talked about, where it's if we want to be a better parent, it's usually what we want to do is we want to point at, you know, our children, we want to point at our spouse, we want to, I mean, I remember years ago walking in your office and pointing everywhere I could point that there was the problems. And I still remember you saying, those really aren't the problems. And I was like, I would fight it, and I could give all the evidence that would show that, no, it's not me. And yet in the end of the day, it is always about me, not in a place of selfishness, if we want to call it. I'm talking about the focal point of my relationship to this world, right? Has everything to do with how I am and who I am and how grounded I am or how centered I am, or, grabbing it. So how would you, what recommendation, when you talk often about self-confrontation, talk just what, because right now there's, if you really, you've said this, right? And I think I'm maybe saying it just about how you say it. If you want to really grow, then you have to self-confront, and that's scary.
Well, it really is.
So speak to that a little bit.
I mean, here we are in a moment where if you want to grow, you have to take yourself on. You really have to self-confront, because self-confrontation is the drive wheel for personal growth. It's how we begin to master ourselves, which is, by the way, the only thing you can ever hope to master in this life. You'll be really lucky if you pull it off.
You will in moments.
Yeah.
All right, exactly. I love that, Sharon.
And you'll only do it if you have a clear intention. You know, I think we're going to emerge from this quarantine, this pandemic, in one of three ways. We're either going to be worse off, or we're going to be about the same, or we're going to be better. Now, worse off may not be up to you. Some people will die. Some people will lose people that they love. They'll be in a state of grief and loss. Other people will be experiencing financial changes. There are going to be forces outside of people that shape their lives, and they may come through this worse off. They may lose the business that they dreamed of their whole life. It may not be here when this is over, and they may have to rebuild. One of the options is worse off, and you don't always get a lot to say about that. However, you do get to choose how you respond. I mean, Viktor Frankl said, the last freedom is how we respond, which is profound. But
that is profound.
If you lose a partner, if you lose your business, you're coming out of this worse off. You can still grow, you can still find meaning. And it is true, the last freedom is how we respond. There's going to be a whole group of people who take the middle ground here. They're going to come through this and they'll be unchanged. They'll either be willfully ignorant and not pay attention, because that's more comfortable for them. They'll be addicted to their way of being. They'll think that they're right all the way through. There are people who are not being affected. I don't know whether you know this, but there are people who are largely unaffected by this entire pandemic right now. I think a lot of people are going to be in this middle group. They're going to move through this and be largely unchanged when they come out of it. I don't want to be in that group. I don't want to be in the first group either, but it's not entirely within my control. The question is, if you want to come out of this better, what do you have to do? If you're going to come out of this better, you're going to have to work with yourself. And the opportunities for growing and working with yourself are everywhere in this thing, because you're going to find the world to be a threatening place. And we first respond with our amygdala. That fear center of our brain takes over. We orient the world from fear, and we start trying to take control
Of what is external to us.
Right. Try to control all the things on the outside.
Absolutely. That's our reflexive response. And by the way, as stress builds, we tend to default to old patterns of responding that are not our best self stepping in, right?
Yeah.
So the self-confrontation is, I mean, when you talk about your emotions, George, in this conversation, I bet everyone here that's listening can acknowledge to themselves, wow, yes, I have been more emotional. Things have been leaking out of me that have surprised me.
Yeah.
I used to orient myself as more stable, more resilient, more on it than I am currently. So one thing I believe too is if you are able to own where you are and your vulnerabilities that you are feeling in this moment, there are real emotions arising that are appropriate for the situation. So by acknowledging that and feeling that and letting yourself feel that, letting yourself actually be messy, then the next movement is, okay, so now what do I want to do with this? How do I want to respond to where I am right now with how I'm feeling in a way that I move in with my best self rather than my reflexive fight or flight or freeze kind of response to a situation, which I think is arising more than we can even appreciate.
Yeah, it's so
I
frequent.
agree.
When
So,
buying a loaf of bread is complex, everything is complex. That's
yes,
just
it
the
is.
nature of this thing. Sharon's fond of saying, feel it before you fix it. Feel it, F-E-L-L, okay? Feeling something before you attempt to address it becomes really important. Let your emotions inform you. So one of the first steps here is to recognize, I'm feeling something here. Let me see what it is. You know, we respond so habitually and so quick. I can go from 0 to completely pissed off in about 2 seconds, okay? You know, there's no
Especially
stop.
right now.
You know, you talk about
Yeah.
Bella hitting the gas pedal. You know, I didn't even think about the brakes. I just went for the gas in those 2 seconds. So the question is, can you acknowledge something? Can you feel it? So the first step ultimately is feel it before you try to do anything with it. And we don't do that. We fly over it trying to control it. So it makes sense.
So hey,
to feel
Paige,
the-
I add this into it. I know but just please add this into what you're going to say. And people are like, oh my gosh, let him finish. But the thing that Sharon, that you taught me, I'm telling you, is that I like, let's just say something really tragic was happening, and I would come back with, that's interesting.
Uh-huh.
And you guys would be like looking at me going, interesting?
Uh-huh.
Like, this is like tragic.
Mhm.
And I'd be like trying to always keep my emotions. And I think you said something where we underreact on things that are real.
Uh-huh.
I still remember. I mean, I think she'd be okay because there's many people who know, and we've shared the story. But when Jennifer came in and was visiting, she talked about her mother passing away and taking her own life, and she then said, "But I'm okay with it now." And I still remember this day, Paige, where you said, "No one gets over that. Why are you saying that?"
Mhm.
And it was like this shocker, and all of a sudden, this whole avenue opened up for her, which was so beautiful, because all of a sudden, and now I'm so aware of like, is everything just interesting? Because it's just like, wait, there's things that are fantastic and amazing, and then there's like a pandemic that is ruthless, horrific, tragic, instead of like, well, you know, this, I can hear myself in the past would have said, well, you know, this pandemic's interesting, which is make like, what? So I cut you off, but I know that you're in that space. I just want to make sure, because that is the words that we use to not describe our emotion has been one of the big ahas, Sharon, you personally have taught me. So I think it's huge.
Well, to feel what we feel, to fully know what we know, and to really experience it being a human being is uncomfortable. It's so much easier if it's just interesting. You know, it's true. What we want
Right.
things to be comfortable. We don't want disequilibrium, but that's not the human experience. We're going through a pandemic, hopefully a once in a lifetime experience for most of us. It's probably not likely, but at least we won't have another first time with the pandemic if another one comes.
Right. I guess we'll kind of know what it's about. It will be a little more familiar.
Absolutely.
So I want to just say something about social distancing. When you're talking about this language, George, that's actually social distancing from ourselves.
Right.
Using language of that nature and also trying to hold ourselves together where we're not okay with these other feelings that arise in us when they arise, that is a way of staying distant from ourselves. And that actually leads to things like mood disorders. It leads to things like addiction. Some of this is prescribed, not just in our professional lives, but clearly family of origin stuff that came before our parents, all of these prescriptions about how to be in the world. And we carry them forward, even with our language.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yes, it is interesting.
I mean, really,
yes, it
you
is.
hear that, and isn't that interesting? Is the thinnest slice of life. You know, what can we get to? Well, we can get to where we feel what we feel. We know what we know. We're actually experiencing what we're experiencing. In this moment, if your intention is to emerge from this pandemic and the quarantines better, you begin with stopping yourself and beginning to feel what you feel, seeing what's in front of you, to become aware. So the first step out of automatic processing is to become aware. I don't know how many of you have a meditation practice. Sharon and I have two, actually kind of three. We have yoga, individual meditation I practice, and Sharon and I do eye gazing meditation. We look in each other's eyes for 30 minutes, which, by the way, is the most challenging and the most profound of all
brutal
meditations. It's
I told my 17-year-old son we should eye gaze, and he about lost his mind.
Yeah, I'm sure he ran, and that's good judgment, of course.
Yes, yes. But George, this piece about how we look at each other, we live together, we're in this close proximity, we're having how many interactions with each other throughout our day, and how often does this experience of how often do we actually really see each other? So one thing that we're talking about now,
or the quick hug. The thing that's made a big difference is holding each other for just longer than that tap tap. Okay, but the just letting go in that moment. Yes, letting go in that moment and holding each other for just, even if it was for 5 minutes.
The average couple, in one study done some time ago, spends less than 5 to 8 minutes in face-to-face looking at each other a day. Now the British are much less than that. The Italians are much more. But it's interesting. Wow, we have the thinnest slice of experience. Why? Because that's what we can tolerate. Because if we hold one another's eyes, if we actually slow down enough to feel what we feel before trying to fix it or get rid of it, we become aware. So the first practice ultimately is going to be to become aware of our experience here. And that means being human. And frankly, about half of your people listening to this broadcast are probably going to the restroom at this moment and said, no, thank you very much.
It's because it's scary. It is. Yes.
Okay.
It is.
And the scary thing, George, the thing that is really scary, we tend to try to avoid. And as we avoid what is scary, it persists in its scariness. The only way through is through. So the more we step into the things that we fear, the more we grow our capacity for it, and the less charge and fear it creates in us. And so this eye gazing practice, your own meditation, this is actually intimacy with yourself. And it's also learning strategies to find a breath and to find some sense of calm that you can find in yourself while the world goes swirling on and things occur that are not under our control.
In the world within us, when we find out that we can handle it. When you hold your partner's gaze or you focus on your breath and you give yourself a minute to feel it before you fix it, you actually find out, well, I can feel this and I can hold this. It doesn't spin out.
Yeah.
It doesn't become the chaos that I imagined. In fact, perhaps it doesn't become the chaos that I observed other people move into when they had strong emotions. Maybe you grew up in a household with parents who did not manage their emotions, who did not feel them and then blew up. They stuffed it, and blew up. And so the only emotions that you saw experience were scary, loud ones. And so you may live in forever being afraid of feeling anything yourself, for fear that you're going to lose control. Well, as you slow down and you feel it before you fix it, as you give yourself the benefit of being a smart primate with a cell phone, just working on this thing as best you can, you find out, I can actually feel this. The strangest thing happens as you begin to calm. And if you can follow your breath a little bit while you're doing that, just breathe in. To a count of 4, out. To a count of 8, really feel that exhalation as you're feeling your emotions, considering your thoughts. Whether it's the chaos of the moment, the pandemic, or the tension you feel with your child, you can become fully informed and find out, well, I can feel this. and I don't spin out of control. In fact, you'll find that what happens is when you move into that zone, you start to feel a greater sense of control because you're only controlling the one thing that you can, you. We're about the only thing we got that we have some control of. A lot of us are trying to control our children. I mean, I grew up in a household with a father who was in the military, ex-GI from World War II. Fortunately, he was a trombone player in the Air Force Band, so not a lot of trauma there. But nonetheless, came out of a very authoritarian place. His father was an orphan, didn't know how to parent, and had 12 kids. I mean, my story is actually not that unusual in the West. Well, you did it because they said so. They were the authorities. They were trying so hard to maintain control in a world that had been pretty crazy. And, you know, whether it's the 1918 flu, the Great Depression, World War I, II, I mean, you go on and on and on. We
Right.
People have come to be shaped by terrifying things. And when parents were in charge, the belief was you were in charge. Do it because I say so. That was a way of them avoiding themselves and not dealing with the complexity of what it is to be a human being for their children.
Yeah.
When you get a hold of yourself, you take that breath, you feel what you feel, you're going to find out not only do you spin out of control, but you get more control over yourself. And then you can actually look at your child. You can look at your partner, your lover, and you can be aware, and you can take a moment to see them, actually have a moment of meeting with other human beings. And every time I have a moment of meeting with Sharon, I wind up smiling. It's an involuntary response. I like the woman. And all I like to do is persist there for just a little bit beyond my moment of upset about whatever it was her telling me to do something that I didn't want to do or whatever. Then,
okay.
Of course.
So Paige, let me ask you this then.
Then I find mastery of myself. I can actually move into a connection with myself, find out it's not chaos. I can see her, and I can actually form a relationship with somebody outside of me that doesn't involve me controlling them.
So here's the, okay, so hold on, here's the what if then, because this is one of the questions asked in the chat.
Okay.
What if you have when we've talked about this, you have a willing, you are more than willing, but possibly you have people or a partner in your life that is unwilling to work through those things. How do you hold your ground if you don't have someone who's willing to do the work with you from that standpoint, which I know there's a lot of people that could be very disappointed from the standpoint of, wow, here's some great ways in which we could do some better things to improve ourselves, to improve our relationship. But what if they're not willing to do that? How do you handle that?
Well, it's going to be really an unhappy answer for you. You double down on dealing with yourself. You want to create a crisis for your partner, and I don't recommend it as a pursuit, but if you really want to create a crisis for your partner, don't deal with them as the problem.
Well, so Paige, hold on. So I wrote down, hold on, because I've had this written. I got to say this because you're going to add into this. Hold on, you guys will do this. Just hold on. I used to say, well, I didn't tell her that, or I didn't say this to that person because I didn't, basically in simple terms, I didn't tell them the truth because I was trying to protect them. And I remember when you said that to me, I said that, and you're like, that has nothing to do with protecting them. You're trying to protect yourself. And the level of anxiety that I can deal with seems to be the level of growth that seems to occur. And the bigger I'm able to deal with anxiety, the larger my growth bubble goes, or whatever you want to call it. It seems to expand radically in such a positive way. So talk about just dealing with truth and integrity and both of you. It's such a profound concept and seems so radical to tell the truth.
Well, you know, as long as we deal with small t truth, because a lot of people are talking about my truth in caps right now, like they got the truth. What they have is an opinion. What they have is a way of seeing the world. They're seeing the world the way that they are. That's a small t truth, okay? So what we're really dealing with is my preferences, the things that I've been programmed to believe, all the stuff that I prefer. And so when we deal with small t truths, we recognize I'm dealing with just my own thoughts and opinions about this, and I may very well be wrong. One of my mentors suggests two things. Don't believe anybody else, and for sure, don't believe you. Test it out. I like that approach to truth. It allows you to deal with small t truth. When you're in conflict with a partner, you're dealing with small t truth. It's mostly opinions, preferences, values, and so forth. So you're in a situation where your partner's not growing in a convenient way for you, which is always exasperating and frustrating. Why don't they grow in a way that I prefer, in a way that's interesting? And why are they not growing in the way that I prefer? Why are they growing in that? Okay, they're the
I love that, by the way.
And so,
Oh gosh.
I mean, none of us have ever experienced that, of course, that moment of being with someone where they're the problem, you know. Well, that's all we do. This is about really recognizing that if I really want to create change in my life, I need to work with myself and notice that my partner doesn't buy it. They already have their own values and preferences, and they may persist in it. But one of the most amazing things happens in a relationship when you do your own work. If your partner values the relationship and they witness doing your work, witness you doing your best work, even though it's imperfect, eventually they have to take themselves on. It's a strange thing. When you act with integrity and you take yourself on in the presence of your partner, and you don't make your growth contingent upon them being convenient and supportive, and you continue when they test you, eventually they're struck with a moment there of personal awareness. And in that moment, it's, if I value this relationship, I'm going to have to grow too.
Here's another reason, George. None of the old strategies work. When one person is taking themselves on and doing their own work and growing themselves, the old dynamics and bids for certain things to happen or efforts to control don't work anymore. They collapse. And now the person that you're with is faced with a moment of their own confrontation of something else I need to do something else here.
Well, and you guys have both taught me that truth creates conflict. And my observation, I kind of finished that, if truth creates truth creates a conflict, then it's either there's growth ahead, or I've even seen it where there's a little bit of separation ahead. Right. Because truth creates some level of some conflict, which is, it's been very interesting to me is truth is, and then the question is, can you hold your shape? Can you hold your own while you're expressing the truth? Or to your point, even if it's your opinion, if you're expressing, can you hold your shape? Can you hold your true shape as you move through that? I think it's fascinating. So Sharon, I want to open up to, so guys and gals who are listening, just one, any questions that you have, but just with the remaining time, I want to make sure, Sharon, that we talk about, you've got a lot of people specifically in this company that are mothers, of course, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got a lot of people who, and you have been such an expert in, as I've observed, in working with women. What counsel would you give to a woman today? And what counsel would you give to a businesswoman today? Hence, you're both.
Sure.
That is a very big question, George. I love it. It would be one thing that Paige and I talked about. While this is a pandemic, we're facing ourselves just again, where the pressures feel now life-threatening. Mm-hmm. But outside of a pandemic, we experience our pressures as the most important things in the world to us, right? Even before a pandemic existed. So I think what I would suggest really for women, one is what I was just saying to you a little bit earlier, just acknowledging and noticing the feelings that arise and allowing the space for your own feelings to arise, not be so judgy about it, about whether this makes me, I have a grip, I'm competent. Like, we don't have to label this as something good or bad about ourselves, just having the allowance and space for it. Because not only does that get us to be more compassionate and in relationship with ourselves, but then we can look at the people around us with greater understanding too. While our partner struggles with something, we can just keep the context in mind and understand that there are a lot of feelings going on with our partner, our children, and allowing space for that. And even just acknowledging or inviting those conversations into existence.
And if I may, this is where that moment of awareness, where you take yourself on comes in so handy. If I can just take a breath and feel something as a mother parenting a child, before I try to fix it, before I try to change this child's behavior. Part of this is about recognizing that we're always having moments of meeting with our children, with our spouses, with our clients, and so forth. And in these moments of meeting, we're either attuned or we're not. And when you're attuning to your child, extraordinary things start to happen. But when you're trying to force a child to comply with convenience, and I'm not saying there aren't times for that, even for safety reasons, but when you're trying to force a child into a way of being that feels comfortable to you, merely because you prefer it, you're out of attunement. When I was 12 years old, I played in a rock and roll band. My dad was a professional musician. He would come down in the basement with his hands in the air and he'd say, stop, stop, stop. And he would make us tune. He would make all the guitarists tune because he had perfect pitch and none of them knew how to tune their guitars. And we thought we were wailing, we were driving the poor man crazy. But 2 or 3 times a practice, he would come down and make us tune up. All of my guitarists, I was a drummer, knew how to tune their guitars, and we got to be very, very good. They're still phenomenal musicians. He taught them to attune to each other, tune in with themselves, and to be aware of being in pitch. When you do that with your child, you create the possibility of a harmonious relationship because you're understanding them first. There are times when you cannot do that. In the interest of time, you have to move quickly. But by dialing in, you create a new possibility, a different kind of moment of meeting with your kid.
I also want to say with attunement, George, just to go further with what you're asking me about women too, attunement to yourself. And that means, how are you doing self-care right now? I think it's extremely important more than ever with all of the stress. What are you putting into your body? It's very easy to seek comfort foods, things that are not feeling good, not healthy, not helping our brain be a little crisper during a time when we're feeling more confusion and chaos. So one is about how we're feeding ourselves, the nutrition. There's something else about how you're moving your body. Are you finding a way to take those breaks? Even right now, as you're sitting here in your seat, are you as comfortable as you can be? Do you feel tension in your body? Can you find release? What if you just get up and move? Your music that you were playing before I really sat down, I got up and I was just dancing around the room. I'm serious. While stuff is happening, guilt does nothing for us. All it does is takes away energy that we can use really well in our lives. So move in your day. Check in with the people that you love that you're not getting together with, even on a check-in with a women's group. Create one. Find your favorite people that you speak the truth to, that can show up and say, God, I feel really messy today. It was hard for me to show up for this group today because I was feeling, I don't want to bring you all down. And then your friends say, God, it's so good to just see your face, and permission to have the experience that you're having. Anyway.
Love that. We have a question that's here, and then a few more I'm sure will come, and then because we got about 10 more minutes. But this has been great. I mean, there's been so many things that are continuing to come up on the chat. I hope that you both will look at them before we end the call, because they've been so complimentary and so gracious. And thank you for what you're giving back to us. So people who are not really honoring, if you would say, the social distancing, we've had a number of different situations where we've had, kids playing with kids where we've observed and we've held back from doing that, and watching the grieving process of even our own children, watching, my 15-year-old Ethan, man, he went to a really dark space for a period of time. It's taken him a bit to get out of that. Mm-hmm. How do we deal with that when people aren't being frankly respectful? Like, to your point, Paige, earlier, you said, it's almost like people are acting like, well, nothing's changed. I'm just going to kind of live my life and do everything normal. Yeah. How do we deal with situations like that?
Yeah. Well, we're radical social distancers in a world where people are not really willing to do that. And in spite of that, I found myself too close to people. It's really weird. I'm hanging out and she says, what's going on? And I looked at Rob and I said, holy shit, we're too close. I think I'm busted. It's like I just relaxed into getting the gate open and somehow I had transgressed the prime directive, saved
Right.
life, you know. And,
It's 6 feet. Now I think it's 10
Yeah.
feet. I mean, exactly. Whatever it is, right?
well, it's so fascinating. Well, all right, well, what are we going to do? We have to protect ourselves. Not everybody
And
shares.
others, yeah.
Not everybody shares this belief, and I still feel some obligation to protect them, whether they share it or not.
Mhm.
The fact that you don't believe
Right.
in 6 feet, okay, fine. I'm willing to protect you by staying away. So you have to step
So
back. You have to remind people. And
Okay, so
it doesn't feel
give
good.
us our counsel on this. This part's real life, right? Happening right now. Whether it's Utah or California,
Yeah.
there's only a certain number of people that can go into the home. The home has to be vacant. It's one agent, two clients at most of the time. A lot of people, just the fear that's wrapping around that. How do they? But yet they know that they need to do certain things to protect not only the client, but there's people who. I mean, Paige, the average U.S. citizen has less than 400. I mean, you know this probably better than me because I know how much you study, but has less than $400 in savings if they have that even now.
Yeah.
There's people who are on the next deal that they need to provide economically for their family. I mean, legitimately food.
Right.
There's some people who are like, oh, well, I'm not going to do anything and I'm good. Well, yeah, that's one group of people. There's another group of people. They're like, wait a second here. I don't have 20,000 sitting in the bank. I don't even have $5 sitting in the bank.
Right.
So how do they work through that it's okay to work, to provide, as long as they're doing it in the ways in which it's been designated in the safest manner possible? Help us work through that a little bit from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I just interacted with Jason, our postman, out on the front porch. I said, so how's it going? He said, pretty good. And I said, I noticed you're wearing a different badge today. And it says, stay 6 feet back. Social distancing was amazing. The Postal Service finally this week gave them a badge saying, stay 6 feet away. He said, people are confused a little bit, and some of them are disregarding. So he wears the badge. It's a big badge. So my advice to you as a company, to protect your agents, get out in front of it. Create a statement that is given to every prospective client talking about your social distancing do's and don'ts. And that has to be delivered to the people who you're going to serve. That provides people with informed consent. They know what's coming. They're not surprised. You don't have to do it. You know what? Wear your own badge. 6 feet is safe. I want to make sure you're safe. Put it every way you want to, but make sure that people are getting that advertisement. I maintain social distance. I'm concerned about your well-being and my family.
Yeah, it's about consciousness.
It's
about consciousness.
Yeah.
It's also about getting out in front of it. You know, getting out in front of the issue before it becomes you're too close is a big deal. So have a policy, have it be delivered in whatever way is appropriate. And wear a sign. I mean, it's a perfectly appropriate thing. Everybody knows about social distancing, even if they disagree. If you do and you're prominent with it, and it looks as I'm caring for you and me by social distancing,
Yes.
that's what we can do, and then step back. Because that's how you
Like
protect you. At the end of the day, it's your job to protect you.
Sorry, what, George?
What books or what would you reference to say? And I know some of them that you have done given before, but what books would you recommend with what we're dealing with or dealing with relationships? What are some of your favorites that this group could read? We've got a bunch of avid readers and listeners who want to listen to great things, read great things. What would you advise from the marriage standpoint, the parenting standpoint, and just your own personal standpoint?
Intimacy and Desire. I love Intimacy and Desire. David Schnarch is our mentor. And I think
spell his last name, because I know it's Snarch. How do you spell that?
Schnarch.
Mm-hmm.
Schnarch.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Intimacy and Desire or
Passionate Marriage is more textbook version. It's a lot weightier, takes a little more time to get through. He distills it a bit with Intimacy and Desire.
Other books are going to fit with our philosophy, though, which is take yourself on. Dr. Shalafe right now?
Oh, yeah, Conscious Parenting.
Conscious Parenting.
Thank you to you, George.
Is
yeah.
That woman is remarkable because
Yes.
she's integrated mindfulness, meditation practices, parenting, and a lot of stuff that some of you may remember as inner child work. If you're old like me, 20, 30 years ago in the literature. I like her. I also like Michael Singer.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
untethered.
the untethered soul. Untethered soul. Man,
Yeah.
I cannot get enough of that guy.
Yes.
I feel like he's speaking right to me.
Yeah, Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements. All of these people are talking about the same thing. I'm going to tell you something I know as an old practitioner and psychotherapist is there's nothing new under the sun.
Different
There's nothing
language.
new under the sun. We've known for 2,000 years what works. It's from Marcus Aurelius to the present moment. And it basically boils down to this. You have to know yourself. You have to deal with yourself. You have to be willing to take yourself on. Otherwise, you will pass your injuries on to everybody else. You will suffer unnecessarily. And this chain does not get broken. And there are many pathways to doing it. There's a lot of good ones. Byron Katie's work.
I know, I was thinking Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
There's a lot.
So Sharon, or one of you, would it be okay if one of you text me and just maybe just put a few of those books down? Yeah, just I've got people asking for the list, unless you want to pull out the chat once we close the meeting. So if maybe just a text, and then we'll send it out to the company of just
Sure.
along with we'll make sure obviously you get a copy of this also. Guys, we are literally just about time, but just I cannot thank you enough. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, you have a lot of heroes that are listening right now, so it's cool the fact that you're touching so many lives. And I remember asking you, Paige, specifically because we've spent a lot more time together one-on-one. But I remember I said, "Hey, so why do you do this?" And I love the fact is your answer was simply so simple, and it was that I want you to be free. And I can get even choked up about that, because the thing is I think that so many of us are like hunkered down on our past, how we were raised, our injuries, our fear. And one of the things I've appreciated about both of you is that your desire to help people truly live a life that is free is something very, very special that we're very, very blessed to have you be part of what we're doing. So thank you beyond measure for everything you're doing.
You're welcome.
And is there any, we didn't talk about this, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there, if you're open to a way in which to contact you, maybe by an email, or if people might, if they want to reach out to you, if you wanted that, if you're comfortable with that, but if not, I'm okay with that also. Are you okay giving out an email?
Sure. Sure, you can always use my.
It's okay if you're not.
George,
and if not, I know that people will contact me, and we'll pass them on to you. But if you feel like, hey, it'd be okay with this group of about, I guess we've had about 90 or, give or take 90 to 100 people in the group. Mm-hmm. And I know they'd love to be able to, I know there'll be a few of them that I'm sure would love to reach out further if there's a possibility for that.
Great, sure. We're not, yes. We're happy to give our emails. Mine is sharonnoble.phd@gmail.com.
Okay, sure. And then maybe when you send the text of just the 4 or 5 reads that you'd recommend, maybe could you throw your emails on there?
Right,
sure.
That's great. We'll do that.
Would that be okay?
Sure. I mean,
okay.
we're limited, George, in
right
because of our licensure, and
right.
This is a nice way to try to communicate information to a nice group, a large group of people.
You bet. And I realize you'll have your limitations of what you can and can't do, but just I know that there'll be a few where I know that you're very selective as to things that you do and work through that. So
sure.
So thank you. Any last thoughts, guys? Any closing comments? Any moments of final greatness?
My email is paigesin@gmail.com. PAIGEISIN@gmail.com. You can reach me there. It doesn't guarantee a response.
Just right, I get it.
So you can always try and reach me there, and happy to do that. For me, the bottom line is the unexamined life just gets repeated over and over. We have to examine our lives so that we don't repeat our parents' lives, our grandparents' lives, and this culture's life. If you can examine your life, you don't have to repeat it, and you can be free. And that's the whole point of this work. So let's get free.
That's great.
Just for the pandemic.
Great.
See how
I love it. Sharon, any final thoughts? And Sharon, any final thoughts for us?
I'm a huge fan of freedom as well. And part of that too is recognizing our own agency. We are the creator of our lives. We have extraordinary influence also on the quality of experience we're having. What do you want to create?
Yeah.
move into desire.
Yeah.
And things are hard. It's not to deny that or to dissociate from that.
And lastly, have fun. It's time to rock and roll. Let's enjoy this life.
It is fun.
It's
Life,
short.
life is a beautiful thing, and I just, again, thank you so very, very, very much for spending time with us, and I hope that we can have you back if you're willing to be under the hot seat of all these great agents who are looking to your counsel, and sure appreciate everything that you have to share.
Yeah. Stay
Thank you
safe
so
out
much.
there.
Yeah.
Thanks for all you guys do.
All right, guys. Okay. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Sharon. So very, very much. Have a great day, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys. Have an extraordinary day. Thank you for everything. Thank you for everybody being on the call. And hey, the best part is I get to see my mom on the call. So there she is. All right, guys. Have a great day. We'll talk to you in a little bit.